The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back talking vintage sports from the old garden on 49th Street, Nedick's. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and what a full house of great sports freaks we have. I will start with Hal Bock, Associated Press. How are you, sir?
Here with you.
I think I heard David Hubler's voice. Am I correct? Maybe not. How about Stan Cohen, a returning guest from last week? Stan.
You got me.
All righty. Al Blumkin, our maven.
Present.
And accounted for, I know. And George Case III.
Yeah, I'm here as well.
All right. No one I'm forgetting, I hope? Good. As promised, this is a show that Stan and Hal and Al and George are going to take us through the original basketball scandals. Now, as I joked last week, there's a basketball scandal going on every 10 years. So, but the first one was instrumental. And start with you, Stan Cohen. You wrote a book about it.
I did.
What was the book entitled, and how did it come about?
The Game They Played. The Game They Played is the title of the book.
Okay. What year was it written, Stan?
It was published in 1977 for the first time, and then a new edition. I think it was 2001. About 25 years later, a new edition was done. And the
if you can go back and try to determine the time that you first thought, boy, I'd like to write a book about this. This really interests me. What was that moment?
In 1977?
Yeah. Why did you pick this subject?
What happened was,
what was it?
It was really pure chance. I met a fellow from the Bronx, my old neighborhood, which is, obviously I'd left 20-some-odd years ago, and we got to talking, and the subject of the scandal came up, and he said, you know what happened to any of these guys? And, of course, I had known a few of them, or met a few of them before, and I realized, except for one, Ed Roman, I had no idea what happened to any of them. And after that, I spoke to a number of people I knew. Nobody knew anything about it, and I thought it would be a good idea to add the book. And it was a different kind of book that I started out to do because I was hoping to get interviews with all the players, or some of them anyway. And some of them agreed and then all backed out. And so I did a different kind of book. It was almost a memoir of what life was like at that time and what basketball was like in the schoolyards of New York, particularly the Bronx. And I went into a lot of other subjects, the judicial system, racial issues, because it was only black players who went to prison at the time. And so it became a completely different kind of book, and probably a lot better than it might have been otherwise, because it became somewhat popular. HBO made a documentary of it called City Dump. And
oh, yes, I do. I remember that very well.
Yeah, well, that was based, but I was I forgot my title, program consultant or something, and that was done I think about 2001. It was done pretty much around the same time as the new edition.
Okay.
So
let me go around the room a little bit. Now I'm going to ask you all memories of the scandal. Al Blumkin, what comes to mind?
Well, of course, I was only 8 years old when that broke. But when I first started following the NBA back then, I realized that certain players were kicked, like Alex Groza and Ralph Beard, after playing 2 years, and certain players like Bill Spivey from Kentucky and Sherman Wyatt, the LIU, who was supposed to be the Knicks' overall first draft choice, and the guys from City College. But I didn't have a real grasp on what happened. And I read Stan's book shortly after it came out. I have an original edition of it, and that really It was very educational. I thought it was very well done and really got into it. Well, I just was had known the what I call peripherals of what happened.
Yeah. Well, you know something interesting is that we guys on the street had a pretty good idea that there was point shaving going on before anything happened. We just didn't think City was involved. City was a special place for us because, you know, we grew up in not very lucrative financial situations, and I always said, right now my twin grandchildren are applying for colleges. It was easy for me. You took a test, you either went to City College or you went to work. So, I mean, that was a place of refuge for us, mostly sons of immigrants. And so they were kind of heroes to us, but we had an idea that LIU was involved something because the neighborhood bookmaker, a guy by the name of Joe Jalop, whom, you know, some of us got to know one way or another, there were a lot of games they wouldn't take any bets on LIU. And the thing about LIU is they were a tremendous team. They're a more talented team than City. And the point spreads on their games tended to be rather high. They were very often favored by double digits, which made it easy to shave the points because you could keep it below 12 a lot easier than you can keep it below 4 or 5. And so we had an idea that there was things going on with LIU because the bookmaker wouldn't take bets, and very often they won the game but didn't cover the spread. So we thought that was going to hit LIU. We were very stunned when it started with City.
Okay, this is a good time to go to George Case III, and I'll tell you why. George was a Division I NCAA basketball player at Rutgers, and it was years later, and I'm just wondering what the atmosphere around talking to gamblers, associating, points, this, that, and the other thing. Rumors, are they rampant or around a program? George, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can address that a little bit. Not about the gambler part of it, but, certainly the publicity and what was going on and the fact that I played at Rutgers and Rutgers played CCNY and we also played NYU and when that point shaving scandal hit, CCNY was one of the top college programs in the United States. As a matter of fact, I think the one year they won the NIT and the NCAA. And, CCNY was a great basketball program. And after the scandal, they now, I believe, and Hal, you're going to have to let me know, but I think for sure they're a Division III program now.
Yeah, there's a city league with Hunter and Brooklyn College and
and they
Queens College and a few of the other city schools that participate on a very low level like that.
Yeah, well, that's what happened, Alan.
Yeah.
And when I was playing at Rutgers, I know we were lousy, but we always at the beginning of the year we would point to the NIT, and we were excited to play NYU and CCNY and Fordham and those type schools that were great basketball powers back then. And matter of fact, the other day I was talking to my son, and he said to me, Dad, what's going on with that CCNY thing? Rutgers beat CCNY by like 60 points the other day. And I said, well, I'm not sure. CCNY is a Division III school. They used to be great. I don't know why Rutgers is even playing them, but, it's a way to get a win early in the season. So, and that whole point-shaving scandal, and you mentioned Stan mentioned HBO. I just happened to do some research today, and I was amazed to find out HBO, when they did that film, the story of the CCNY basketball scandal, City Dump, it was produced by HBO, and HBO were the same individuals who produced our first exposure of our DVD on When It Was a Game. And so that was about baseball. So it was a real tie-in, and I was shocked when I saw it because it mentioned the name of the individual, George Roy and Steve Stern, who I knew both because I went up to HBO headquarters when they were putting When It Was the Game together, and they wanted to have my dad's color film from his baseball days. So when I was reading through about the CCNY situation, it really hit home. I said, geez, I know both of those guys.
Nice. Hal Bock, as a journalist, can you give me your impressions of what happened in those days?
Well, I was a kid. I was 10 years old, and I remember just beginning to follow college basketball. I mean, I was a baseball guy. Baseball was my game. But I became interested in college basketball because here was this team that was going to win that won both the NCAA and the NIT. Never happened before, never will happen again. And I was fascinated by that what a daily double, it's really something. And so when they started arresting these guys, they took them off a train coming back from Philadelphia, and I was heartbroken. I just thought, how can you do that? You don't cheat. You play the game honestly, and I was really broken up by it. And I will tell you a little story. Lou Carnesecca, the great St. John's coach, he's in his 90s now. When he coached at St. John's, the first day of the gathering of the team, when the team first showed up, they're going to start practice and so forth, Louis had a scrapbook of all that went on in 1951 when the scandal broke, in 1950-51, when the scandal broke. And he showed it to his kids, and he said, don't ever let this happen. Don't ever let this happen to you. This is what these guys look like as they're being arrested. And I thought that was a pretty smart thing for him to do, and it probably had a big impact on his players. As a journalist, well, journalists are skeptical people, I guess, and I don't think that we're really stunned when the 10-year cycle that Ralph was talking about comes around. I remember, I went to New York University, and I saw that team go to the Final Four. And some years later, it developed that Ray Paprocki, who was a point guard, was doing some business. So, it's the nature of the beast, I guess. You hope that it never happens again, but maybe it's...
I think something interesting about St. John's is that they were not officially involved in that scandal. However, they were. It just didn't come out. There were three players, if I recall correctly, Jack McMahon, Ronnie McGilvray, and I think Zeke Zawalek. We used to go at night in my old neighborhood in the Bronx. We used to hang out on a street corner where the candy store was and wait for the morning papers to come up, actually. In those days, you'd get the Bulldog edition of the Daily News, let's say, probably come up about 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. And we got a Bulldog edition right around that time. And on the sports page, there was a picture of 3 St. John's players being led into the district attorney's office, Frank Hogan's office, for questioning. The next edition, it wasn't there anymore. I remember going to school. I was going to Hunter College back then. As a matter of fact, it was Division III. I played for Hunter Division III. We played City that year, the year after the scandal. And it wasn't in any of the late editions. It was pulled out, and it never came to light. And the general feeling was, and I think it was quite true, that Frank Hogan, the district attorney, had ties with Cardinal Spellman at the time. And almost certainly it was Spellman who quashed the story and spared the players. And they were very much involved, by every indication. As a matter of fact, Marty Glickman, who used to broadcast the games at the time, told me a story which I interviewed him for the book and I have it on tape. He said, I hope I get the name right, Jack McMahon. At one point, he was talking to Jack McMahon and said, you guys don't know anything about this, do you? And I don't know if I could say this word on podcast. The quote was, he said, Marty, are you shitting me? It was common knowledge that they were involved, along with City and the other schools that were involved at the time, NYU and so forth.
Stan, this was the same Jack McMahon who went on to extensive playing and coaching career in the NBA.
I guess it's the same guy. I don't know.
Played with the Hawks and I think he coached the Hawks he was on the Royals, I think, Royals for a while.
You know, Alan, I think it probably is. I know Jack McMahon. I used to, deal with him when I was in the athletic footwear business.
Yeah.
So I think it probably is because it would have been the same, age time frame that we're talking about. Right.
Well, when Louis Carnesecca talks about that, Jack McMahon compared to someone like Alex Groza can be a great example. McMahon skates. He goes on to a terrific NBA career, isn't disgraced. And Alex Groza doesn't get to play in the NBA, and his name is tainted forever. So, yes, it's a matter of who they decide to prosecute. And, political ties along with the church is long-standing. So.
Yeah, Groza played 2 years in the NBA. He was second in scoring both years, and then after the 50-51 season, he was kicked out. His teammate Ralph Beard.
Do you guys know what he did after that? I know his brother was.
He wound up coaching at years later at a Kentucky school named Bellarmine, which was, fairly low level.
Okay.
He was Lou Groza's brother. Yeah, the younger brother.
Right.
Yeah.
A far cry from stardom. Hey, we've got all of us, Stan, you mentioned New York City schoolyards playing basketball. Now, there are people listening to this from outside, didn't grow up by Nedick's. They don't even know what an orange drink is from Nedick's. Can you guys who go around the room describe not just the basketball, the courts, the playing, but talking ball, hanging by the candy store, neighborhood discussions, discussing sports and what have you. This show is like that. I feel like I'm standing out by Jack and Manny's candy store in Jackson Heights and just talking to my friends about ball. What was that like?
The amazing
with
thing,
our guest Stan Cohen.
This is Hal. The amazing thing about that, and I remember those days very vividly. We did that. We stood at the candy store and we talked about the teams and the players and so forth. How we did it, I don't know, because there was no ESPN. There was very little television in those days. You didn't get to see the players and the games. They weren't exposed the way they are today on a daily basis or a nightly basis. And yet somehow we got the information and we got the knowledge and we schmoozed about it all the time. It was a magical time in New York, and I'm grateful that I grew up in that time and shared in that experience.
Hal, what corner did you stand on with your friends?
East Tremont Avenue in the Bronx.
Wow. Tremont came right before Kingsbridge, where my grandparents lived up on Valentine.
Fordham was in between. Fordham was between Tremont.
Fordham.
That was my neighborhood, Fordham.
Oh, okay.
Now, this is
Tremont,
right off Fordham
and Bedford Park.
And I was Parkchester, but I moved out of there when I was 8. So.
Oh, wow. What corner did you stand on, Stan?
It was 183rd Street and Walton Avenue, just a few blocks south of Fordham Road. So we used to hang out there. But also, the schoolyard was the place. The Creston Schoolyard was one of the basketball meccas of the Bronx. We drew up people from Jack Molinas used to come down there. They used to live in that neighborhood.
So how did we get the information? How did we know all this when there was no?
It was 7, 8 daily
that
papers.
early edition of the news. That early edition of the news was coming in just another few minutes, and get some early box scores sometimes.
That's right. We had 7, 8 daily papers, and the sports sections were chock full because they were in competition with one another.
Right.
You had the Post. You had great sports writers then. You had Jimmy Cannon and Red.
They had those simple box scores in basketball, and the NBA in those days there were only 8 teams.
Yeah.
So it's easy to remember, all these guys. It's not like now there's 30 teams and the half these teams you can't name one player on.
Well, I can't pronounce
George,
names.
you didn't grow up in the big city, but was there an atmosphere that approached what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was a suburban, I lived in the suburbs of Philly, but I knew a lot of Philly guys, and Philadelphia basketball, as we've talked about before, very, very similar to New York City basketball. The kids played in the Sunny Hill League, and they all knew one another, and just like with the Rucker tournament up in Harlem and all that. So, the basketball was known as the city game, and that's what it was. And I know being a suburban player, heck, we go down and we would be in awe of watching, the guys playing on the playgrounds in Philly because they were so much better than we were. And, it was a very similar situation, the Big Five drawing all those great high school players out of Philly the same way that the New York colleges were drawn out of the playgrounds in New York City.
Yeah, at Crescent Schoolyard, we used to get players. Eddie Roman came down there a lot. Molinas came down occasionally. Dick Core from NYU. Bob Santini from Iona. Sunday morning, they had 4 baskets, one at each end of the schoolyard, that usually you played 3-man ball, 3 against 3 on one basket. Sunday, they generally were full court games, and some of these guys would show up. And, of course, they were in a category beyond us. I played Division III, but I wasn't in league with those players. And it turned out that they didn't have 10 terrific plays. They usually had 6 or 7. And they'd look around at the riffraff who was hanging around, guys like me, and the word was, is this guy a player? Could he play? Oh, yeah, this guy can shoot or something. And we'd fill in. So every now and then I got into one of these full-court games with top college players, and I learned more. I learned more playing with them than I did playing college varsity at Hunter College.
Stan, you mentioned that, and playing the way I did, we used to go out in the playgrounds and the schoolyards and stuff, and we'd play shirts and skins, and that's what you do.
Right.
And, you'd play, and here in the Philadelphia, in the Pennsylvania area, there was so much basketball being played that the nets would be all torn up. So they started going to chain nets, and the chain nets would last longer than the fabric nets. But
we didn't have any nets at all.
Yeah, they played. Yeah, and some of them had right, Alan. Some of them had no nets at all.
Yeah.
But you
learned
how to play, and that's what these kids were doing. They were playing basketball, 24 hours a day. They'd be playing midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. They're still playing ball.
And one of the reasons is that all you need was a basketball and a hoop. You didn't need all sorts of equipment and all sorts of space for. Baseball or football or anything like that. So basketball was with one ball in a confined space, and that was it made it easier.
Yeah, that's why it was the city game.
Down in Greenwich Village at the West 4th Street playground.
Yeah,
and the intensity is incredible. These guys play; they play like it's the finals of the NCAA tournament every night, It's amazing.
You know why it is that way? Because you'd go down there and there would be 15, 20 guys waiting to play. And the rule was that you played another team, and if you won, you kept the court.
Right.
If you lost, you were off the court, and there'd be 3, 4 teams waiting to play. So you lose a game, and you're going to be just sitting around for an hour and a half doing nothing, waiting to get the court again. So in order to keep the court, you had to win. And those games were tougher played than the games I played in college, elbowing and banging, and you get bloodied up playing.
Yeah, you would, and that's what it was. Stan, what you're talking about, we always call it winners. You get the winners. So if you kept winning, you kept playing. If you lost, you're going to sit.
And local coaches would recruit out of these, like Rutgers and what have you. Speak to Rutgers. You mentioned that, George, really briefly. Big tournament. Hal, start with you. How did Rutgers come about, and what are your memories of Rutgers?
Rutgers was played in Harlem, in the playground up in Harlem. I never went to the Rucker tournament. My basketball experience was, as I mentioned, the NYU Greenwich Village West 4th Street. But I suspect that it was just as intense. And I know that there were NBA players who wound up playing in the Rucker tournament. Alan might know more about that than I, but that tournament remains a showcase for basketball in the city. I think it was Stan mentioned before, the city game. It really was and is the city game because you have concrete. You know, all you need is concrete. It's a concrete court, and there you go.
Right.
And that's the magic of basketball.
Yeah, calling it the city game, I want to give due credit. Pete Axtell wrote an excellent book called The City Game about basketball. It was a wonderful book. I don't want it like we're stealing the title.
But he discusses a couple of guys in that book, like Captain Owings and Earl Manigault, who were, great street players who, for one reason or another, never made it to professional basketball. One of them, I think, was drugs and a couple of other things.
Tell him about the GOAT, Earl the Goat Manigault.
Manigault, yeah. I never saw him, but I've read about him. But he was, he was supposed to be great up there, but a lot of factors came into his not being able to pursue a college or a pro basketball career.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
They're amazing athletes.
What sport would you guys have played if you didn't live in the city? Basketball is a city sport. Would have it been baseball more?
Absolutely.
Probably, yeah.
And same with you?
Yeah, certainly would have been baseball. Not big enough for football, although we played touch football, of course, in the city yards and streets. But, actual football, I was at my playing weight, I was about 5'9.5", 150 pounds. I don't think I would have made it at football.
Okay. Well, in my time growing up in New York, there weren't enough grass fields to really get good in football, even if you were more than 5'9". So, very difficult. This has been a terrific show, as usual.
I want to ask Stan one thing. Wasn't it Julius Kellogg, the Manhattan player, that broke the whole thing wide open?
Yeah, Julius Kellogg broke the whole thing.
Yeah.
The thing was Eddie Gard, who played for Manhattan. He was actually the cashier behind all of this. He pretty much got it started. He made the connections with Salvatore Salazzo, who was the gambler, and it was Eddie Gard who brought people in and from Manhattan. And Kellogg, it took enormous courage. I interviewed Kellogg. He was there were just a few people who would talk to me. He was, of course, eager to because he was a hero of it. But he went to the DA's office and he just brought it right up, and he made an awful lot of enemies with that. But he was a man of great courage and principle, and it was he who broke it.
Didn't he wind up in a wheelchair?
Yes.
Automobile accident?
I don't remember. No, Ed Warner wound up in a wheelchair from City College from an automobile accident. I don't know what it was that happened with Kellogg, but it's true. He did wind up in a wheelchair, as I recall.
Yeah, A.L. Rupp said about when it broke here that they couldn't touch his boys with a 10-foot pole.
Right. Yeah. And about a week later, they were all involved. Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you again. Hal Bock, George Case, Stan Cohen, and Al Blumkin.
Yeah, I want to ask George one thing before. Would he like to say a couple of words about Bobby Dorr, who just passed away?
Yeah, Alan, I'm glad you mentioned that. I had made a note to myself to talk about that. I did want to extend, our sympathies, but, Bobby Dorr was probably one of my dad's closest friends in the major leagues, and he played against Bobby for many years. And our DVD has color footage of Bobby taking batting practice at Fenway Park in 1940. My dad and Bobby were both outdoorsmen, so they used to talk hunting and fishing, and it's just one of those things. Bobby had a wonderful life. He was very caring. He took care of his wife. As a matter of fact, it was the subject of the book, The Teammates, David Halberstam's book about Pesky and Dom DiMaggio going to visit Ted Williams, and Bobby Dorr was supposed to be there with him because Ted called them my guys, but Bobby was in Portland, Oregon, taking care of his wife at the time and couldn't make the trip. So it was a sad note to see that Bobby died the other day, but on the other hand, he had a wonderful, full life, and he was an outstanding player and probably even a better person.
That makes he was 99. This makes Red Shanings, who's 94, the oldest living Hall of Famer.
Right. And we talked about that the other day, too. I think there's only a few players other than Hall of Famers, but I know that Bobby Shantz is still with us. He's in his 90s. Bobby Brown is in the 90s, right. So
I have a friend who's very good friends with him.
Brown is still with us. Eddie Robinson. I'm not
right.
Jim Rivera, the White Sox outfielder, also passed away today.
Right.
Who did?
Yeah, he was 95. Yeah.
Who did?
Jim Rivera.
Oh.
There was an interesting guy, Jungle Jim. I'm sure we could do a show on him someday. He had some troubles with the law along the way, but wow, anytime you hear a name, it's just like it's a big sports family, and that's very sad. Rest in peace to both of them.
Yes.
Okay, I thought Bobby Dorr should have been mentioned.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because he certainly should be mentioned. And
my pleasure.
Bobby was a wonderful ambassador for the game and just a terrific human being.
Okay, again, podcast radio's shameless self-promotion. Stan, would you promote anything, any book that you have going, where it can be bought, what your projects are?
Well, I can. As a matter of fact, I just finished the book. Just finished the revisions on it. The book is called. It's about the Yankees of 1936 to 39, the DiMaggio Yankees. It's called Baseball's Greatest Dynasty, and they're planning publication for opening day in 2018. As a matter of fact, right on my desk as I sit here, I'm going through photos and writing captions for them. So that's my latest project, and we'll be ready to go on at opening day.
Beautiful. George, again, I sometimes neglect to have you mention the terrific DVD that you put together, and if you would.
Well, thank you, Ralph. What it is, it's called Ballfield to Battlefield and Back from FDR to JFK. And it's color footage of World War II Major League Baseball with about 80 Major League players who served their country first, and about 40 of those players, including Feller and Williams, DiMaggio, Greenberg, they served the United States during World War II. So our website, www.timelessbaseball, has all the DVD information, and I did mention about HBO. They used about 7 minutes of my dad's film when they were doing When It Was a Game. So my father was a little bit ahead of his time. There was no video. There was no, the record of Major League Baseball during that era was pretty much black and white. But my dad's films, home movies, were all in color. So,
How did he get into filming and photography?
He just loved it. It was a hobby of his, Ralph. And, I think I mentioned before, he would, at the end of the season, he'd come home with his little projector and put the screen up in our living room. And I'd say, Daddy, are we going to watch these films again? And he'd say, well, just show you what happened this past year. And then as he got older and I became more aware of it, I said to him, Pop, we've got to really talk about who these players were because, in the future, people are they're going to know a Babe Ruth or a Lou Gehrig or a Bob Feller or a Hank Greenberg or a Ted Williams, but these other players, they're going to have no idea who they are. And so that's what the DVD is all about. It's color footage and narration, by my dad and Mickey Vernon of the actual 8mm home movie films that they took during their Major League Baseball careers.
Oh, beautiful. Hal, I want to talk about your column, where it can be found.
I write a column every week, at least one column a week, for a website called New York Sports Day, and it carries my signature title, which is Box Score, and I enjoy doing it. It keeps me busy and keeps me writing sports, which is what I always wanted to do and what I want to always do. So that's
what was this week's column about?
I know what I wrote about this week. I wrote about this harebrained scheme that the Mets have come up with. They're going to limit their starting pitchers to 2 trips through the batting order. In other words, 18 outs. 9 and 9 would be 18 outs. But that's going to put a tremendous burden on their bullpen. And I said their bullpen will be burned out by June 1st because they're going to be using relievers in every game. And I say this with a great deal of regret. I remember a time when managers gave the baseball to the starting pitcher in the first inning and got it back in the 9th inning.
That's what they did. Absolutely right, Al.
The complete
starting pitchers were paid to start and finish games, and that's what they would say. A manager would come out to take him out of the game. He said, "You're not taking me out of the game. Go on back in the dugout." That's what they did.
Yeah, Allie Reynolds, when he came to the Yankees his first year or two, was called gutless because he could only go 7 innings.
But you know the story of Allie Reynolds? He was diabetic.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he was diabetic, and I've heard it said that he could throw as hard as anyone, Feller or the rest of them, but that his diabetes kept him from throwing it often enough. But that for one pitch, he was as fast as anyone there was. But he lacked endurance because he was diabetic. But if you remember, Reynolds also used to pitch in relief.
Yeah, when Stengel got there, he started pitching him in relief.
Yeah,
I remember reading that when they got him, from Cleveland, one of the raps on Reynolds was he couldn't pitch more than 7 innings. Now, of course, that's the bar.
Right.
That's called a quality start now.
Yeah.
The 1953 World Series, if I remember correctly, Reynolds started a game. He went deep into the game. He came in relief the next day.
He relieved in the final game. He got the trivia. He won World Series games in all 5 of those years. But the one he won in 1953 was the last game. He came in for Whitey Ford and took a 3-1 lead, gave up a home run to Carl Ferrillo in the top of the 9th, and then Billy Martin singled in the run in the bottom of the 9th. He was credited with the win.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the series where Martin came in and made that shoestring catch.
That was that was 52.
That was 52? All right.
Yeah.
All right, close enough.
Yeah,
I'm pretty good on those teams. I've done work on those teams.
Alan, you know your stuff. I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
George, I know you're smiling like did you smile when he said that?
Absolutely.
Every week on two shows, not just 2 shows with me on the Senator Show. He does a show with David Nemick. Alan does sports trivia and old-time baseball history. You do one, Alan, with David Finoli on this network. I'm so proud of. Pittsburgh Sports, which includes Pitt, and you are an incredible asset, Alan.
Thank you.
Just to tell you that, as all you guys are. So I'm thrilled. I get to talk sports just as if I was standing at the candy store, and that's not bad. So we'll see you guys next week. When I sign off, I'm going to push a button. Stan, would you stay on? I want to get some information so I can call you and have you return on a regular basis, if you would, to all the shows on this network. I hope you become part of it.
Thank you. Okay.
Beautiful.
Great. Another good show. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Yep.
Everybody enjoyed it. Everybody's has said what they have to say. Am I right? I'm not shortchanging any of you guys.
I'm done.
It's been fun.
I'm done also.
Hal, you're fine.
Right.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Stick on the line. Stan, I'm going to sign off by saying it's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko, and if you enjoyed the offering, I would greatly appreciate it if you would accumulate some lightly used children's books and put them in a box, take them over to the Head Start program in whatever city you're in, and get some kids reading and prepared for school in a positive way. And that would be great. I'm going to sign off. Hope you enjoyed it half as much as I did. I'd be very, very thrilled. See you next week, everybody, and over and out.